Thank you, Phil. Good afternoon, everybody. I guess I get to compete with lunch. So as Phil indicated, I'll be talking a bit about financial well-being and give you some perspective on how to kickstart a financial well-being strategy. So Neyber has been working for about 4.5 years in the UK market, and we've currently rolled out financial well-being strategies to about 350 organisations. And before I kind of talk through the presentation, it'd be interesting to just get a show of hands. How many people here have got a financial well-being strategy? So a handful. Okay, great. So the purpose really in terms of the presentation is to try and kind of bring to life what financial well-being strategy is and how we can effectively work on it to engage our employees. And I think what I'm trying to do is to help people that maybe are very early or not started on their journey, but then also to try and give maybe some more ideas to people that have already taken that first step in terms of thinking about what else they could be doing. The thing that I would observe is that when we speak to organisations and go up and down the country and talk about financial well-being, I think the overwhelming approach and response that we get is that people are really keen to do something. I think that the research that Neyber and other organisations have done is really powerful in terms of actually pointing to the fact that actually financial stress is a thing. It's impacting employees. 50% of people that we surveyed across 10,000 UK employees have said that they're borrowing for basic financial needs. And we also know from the research that people that are suffering from money worries also don't leave those problems at home. They bring the problems into the workplace, and it has an impact in terms of engagement. It has an impact in terms of both absenteeism and presenteeism, and that's why organisations are all quite keen to do something about it. But I think that I also see is that it's also quite hard to get going, and sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. And what I want to do today is to maybe try to come up with some ideas about how you could think about building into a strategy, but also to give you some case studies of organisations that are already doing this and that have been doing it for the past 2 or 3 years, so probably viewed as early adopters, just to try and kind of bring to life what the approach that they've used. So I think to start with, I would suggest there's probably 5 things that I would kind of highlight as being really important when you're thinking about a financial well-being strategy. Now, the first thing that I would say is that it is a journey. So it's not something that's going to be a range of tactical things that you can do, a short-term tick box, and then effectively move on. And I think that is really important. And the companies that I'm going to highlight today have taken that longer-term strategic approach to effectively building into a strategy, and they recognise that actually it's not something that's going to be a project that they're going to do for that quarter, but it's something they're going to have to start and then effectively just invest in it in the long term. There's a famous Chinese proverb, which is, it's a journey of 1,000 miles, but that begins with a single step. And I think that's really, really important when you're thinking about your financial well-being journey. The second thing I would say is focus on what you've already got. And you might think, well, we don't really have anything. We don't do financial well-being. You know, we've invested in physical well-being and we've really got on board with mental well-being, but actually we don't really have anything in terms of financial well-being. And I would challenge you to say, and say that actually that's probably not true. You probably have a whole range of initiatives that you've already got within your workplace that actually do resonate around the concept of financial well-being, but they're not really being wrapped up into one single strategy. So many of you would have an EAP line, I'm guessing. A number of organisations would be supporting the employees that are feeling most vulnerable with things like an EAP line. And you might also provide things like debt advice. You might be doing things like Save As You Earn. and you also probably, I would guess, have your pension in place as well. So there are, half a dozen things that I've highlighted that probably most people in this room would actually be able to say, actually, you're right, they probably are financial well-being, but I'm not really thinking about them as a group. So I think the first thing to say is have a look at what you've got and think about pulling it together, because it's really important that when you embark on the strategy that you're communicating everything together as a package. The third thing I would say is use the data. And that can, again, be overwhelming because, what you don't want to do is to start to have to pull together loads of new information. And again, I would say it's probably not necessary. You probably just need to spend a bit more time looking at the data you already have and analysing it. So what is the take-up of hardship loans across your organisation? What is the participation of things like Save As You Earn? Maybe looking at your pension data, and I think people do this, but looking a bit more deeply into your pension data in terms of the demographic of people that potentially have decided to opt out. Looking at your EAP provider, have you picked up the phone to the EAP provider and actually asked them the question and said, what is the main reason, or what are the main reasons that employees are actually asking for assistance? And they would probably be able to give you a breakdown over time around the percentage of employees that are calling in because of financial stress-related issues. And this is all really powerful stuff, because what you really need to do is to make sure you provide that business case so that you actually are starting from those business case foundations when you build a strategy. The fourth thing I would highlight is engaging your employees. So that could be by having conversations, running focus groups, or actually just adding in some additional questions in a staff survey that effectively asks questions around financial wellness. Now, there is one thing I would highlight here is make sure you're asking the right questions in a way that would maybe not be concerning to employees, because obviously if you haven't asked these questions before and you're asking questions around money and financial wellness, sometimes that can cause a bit of a concern in terms of why is my employer asking me this? And also, whilst we all know that we try to maintain anonymity, there is always a concern from employees about whether this is really anonymous. And so in order to get the right level of engagement and feedback from your people, I think it's really important about how you ask those questions. And if you are looking for some support and some ideas, we can obviously field you some questions to include in your survey. The fifth point I want to talk about is having stakeholder buy-in. So once you've put together all of the things that I've already talked about in terms of building that business case, taking the employee feedback, taking the data, effectively building that business case, and then presenting it back to your HR stakeholder management team and also to your board to actually get that senior level of buy-in. And I think the thing that I would highlight across the organisations that are most successful at running a financial wellbeing strategy is that they have top-level buy-in from the board, but this is a really important business initiative that we're prepared to invest in. So that's what I think are the most sort of important things, and hopefully it will help you if you are very early on in your journey in terms of thinking about what do I actually do. So moving on, I'm going to feature 4 organisations, Anglian Water, Defra, London City Airport, the Cooperative Group, and actually just talk a little bit about what those organisations have done in terms of their financial wellbeing journey. So starting with Anglian Water, obviously working within the utilities sector, they have predominantly field-based employees, often doing quite heavy manual type jobs. And they were an organisation that when we met them about 3 years ago, wanted to migrate away from just having a core health and safety agenda towards actually having a truly holistic wellbeing agenda. There were some data points that they were concerned about, which included calls into EAP lines around financial stress, but also applications for hardship loans that seemed to start increasing. And those were kind of a couple of the things that were sort of a tipping point for the board to understand that actually they needed to do something. Now, where they were in their journey was that they weren't quite sure about what was actually going to resonate with their people. And so we suggested to them that maybe it would be a good idea to start softly and start small. And essentially what we suggested was that they should run a pilot. So we took a 10% sample of their employees, so 500 employees, and we launched a pilot with those people and essentially surveyed them up front around their financial wellness and what they perceived to be their own needs. We ran that pilot for a couple of months, and actually the response was incredible. I think there was close to 7% of the population applied for debt consolidation loans very early on and also engaged with financial wellbeing content. And I think that was enough evidence to demonstrate that actually there was a need for them to address financial wellbeing. What they did quite quickly, having originally decided to run the pilot for a period of 6 months, was actually to go from pilot to full launch within a matter of 2 months, because they realized that actually it was such an important topic for their people. And what they've seen in terms of evidence is really encouraging. So, they're starting to see the benefit in terms of employees feeling more supported. There's just generally a lower taboo in the organization around talking about money worries, and also data points like hardship loan applications have actually gone down, which is hugely important. The next organisation I want to talk about is the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. So Defra is one of the largest civil service organisations. They again have a range of employees across a range of geographies in the UK. Some of them are desk-based, but the majority are field-based employees. They started their financial wellbeing journey very early on. So back in 2015, they decided to work with the Money Advice Service and actually surveyed their people around their financial wellbeing needs. And Natalie Jutler, who is the key stakeholder that has sponsored the project within the HR team at Defra, described the results of that survey as staggering. So staggering in the sense that over 80% of employees that responded to the survey, and they had very good engagement in their survey, has said that they would appreciate additional support from their employer in terms of supporting their financial well-being. So it was very clear to them very early on that they needed to do something because this was the ask of their employees. And what they continued to do over a period of the next 2 years was to really kind of talk to their people, engage with their people through additional surveys to try and understand what they would appreciate and what they felt would most address their immediate needs. The approach Defra took was to launch a financial wellbeing hub to provide their employees with educational content, budgeting tools, and better strategies to help employees manage their money. But they also wanted to make sure that they had a tailored approach to their individual employees across the various organisations that make up Defra. So Defra consists of 11 independent organisations, and some of them are very different in terms of the makeup of those people. So therefore, they took a very tailored approach in terms of how they worked with those organisations, with almost separate landing pages and hubs for those people. What they also realised when they analysed the survey data was that employees wanted to also have some type of face-to-face contact, so they didn't just want to have digital education delivered to them. And I think that there is definitely still appetite for people to actually have face-to-face conversations around financial health and what people can do to actually improve their situation. In partnership with Defra, we did about 16 different roadshows across the country, meeting people, talking to them about the importance of financial well-being and actually pointing them to important content that they could then digest and actually inform themselves of what they needed to do. It's still very early days, and we launched with Defra about a month ago, and again we've had about 7% engagement in that short period of time, which I think is fairly impressive and does point to the fact that there was a real need to support employees. The next organisation that I'm going to talk to is London City Airport. So London City Airport launched their financial wellbeing strategy about 3 years ago. And they had identified from their employee survey that financial worries were a key cause for concern, with many of their employees actually living paycheck to paycheck. So there were some specific areas of financial stress that they wanted to identify. Now, a lot of organisations that I speak to are not very clear about whether they should be launching a financial wellbeing strategy because it's just the right thing to do, or whether they could actually demonstrate that there's a positive return on investment. And London City Airport is probably the one that I would really zone in on in terms of actually being able to demonstrate that actually both are achievable. So over those 3 years, we have seen great engagement, and London City Airport has identified that their financial wellbeing benefit is actually the second most popular benefit outside of their pension. So fantastic engagement from their people. The responses that we've seen from the engagement surveys are also really encouraging. So they saw an 18% increase in the survey question, London City Airport cares about my health and financial well-being, health and well-being. And employees also overwhelmingly responded that post the launch of the strategy, they felt much more supported around financial health. But I think the key thing that I would highlight about this organisation is that 52% reduction in workplace accidents as a result of launching that broader wellbeing strategy, which included financial wellbeing. And I think that is really, really clear in terms of being able to provide that base case data around why you want to launch a strategy, try to collect the data and evidence in terms of what the positive correlation has been, and then feeding that back up to your stakeholders to get them to have incremental buy-in. So it's really, really important. And I would highlight that London City Airport and Anglian Water both won Best Financial Wellbeing Strategy, Large and Small Company at Employee Benefits Awards last month. The final company I want to talk about is Co-op, and I think this is something that probably resonates with a number of people that have very large, disparate organisations. So Co-op is an organisation that employs 63,000 colleagues across the UK, across 2,000 sites. And again, the challenge they had was broadly engagement and communication across that population. So how do you launch a financial wellbeing strategy, or any engagement strategy for that, to try and actually get the message across to your employees that you really care and that you're trying to do something different? And again, working with that organisation, making sure that they had senior stakeholder sign-off for the strategy, but also having multi-channel communications was really important in terms of actually driving success and reaching that diverse population of employees. So that's kind of the summary in terms of the organisations that I work with. And I think that I would highlight is, going back to my 5 key things, is that what those 4 organisations did was really kind of hone in on those points. So Anglian Water, they had senior stakeholder buy-in. Peter Simpson, who is the CEO, is passionate about well-being and has won a number of awards from organisations like Business in the Community about his focus on well-being, and they even mentioned their financial well-being strategy in their annual report. If you look at Defra, they went a long way. They took years engaging their employees and actually making sure that they understood what the employees' needs were. London City Airport used data, so they measured what the issues were before, but importantly, they measured the outcome. So they were able to demonstrate a tangible ROI from launching a financial wellbeing strategy. And Co-op recognised that it was a journey of improving engagement and improving wellbeing across the organisation, and that actually it wasn't just about taking one step, but at least one step did get them going. Thank you.